Do the ancient Stoic philosophers have anything to offer English language learners? I'm Joseph. This is Input English. Let's get started with this interesting idea. A little background in brief. When I was growing up in the United States, it was in the latter half of the 20th century, and it was a very optimistic time. It was after World War II, after the Korean War, and people were very optimistic. We were very influenced by television, and television was carefully concocted such that the good guys always win and justice always prevailed. With that kind of input in the day-to-day from our entertainment, when we got to school, when they started talking about philosophy as a subject, it tended to be more optimistic approaches to philosophy. It tended to be Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and very superficial treatments of those. So as a really curious kid, I spent a lot of time in the library, and I can recall how unsatisfying it was to be looking at a book by Plato with the ancient Greek on the left side and the English translation on the right side, and neither page made any sense to me at all. These translations back in that era were really terrible. They were perhaps excellent from an academic point of view, but they were very old, very unapproachable. They were opaque. When it came to Stoic philosophy, nobody was talking about them. It sounded very depressing. These are people that put up with a lot of hardship. And we didn't want to talk about hardship. We wanted to talk about upbeat, positive things, like what we saw on television. Now, in the 21st century, we are seeing a resurgence in interest in Stoic philosophy. There's a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of content being created about it. So why is this the case? There are probably lots of reasons, but we can identify a few. Texts from the original works by the Stoic philosophers do exist, and they've been translated, so the material is available. A lot of the quotes from these ancient philosophers are very bite-sized. They're very easy for us to digest in this fast-paced world. Quotes from the Stoic philosophers have a lot to do with how we conduct ourselves in the day-to-day and how we deal with adversity, with difficult people, and our own tendency to be less than productive. I'm told that Stoic philosophy is very popular in Silicon Valley. We also have the influence of Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday is a businessman, author, lecturer. He lives in Texas, and he has a big presence on YouTube, and his subject matter is entirely Stoic philosophy. I would characterize Ryan as a curator of Stoic philosophy. He provides a lot of quotes from these philosophers and then puts them into context and gives you a nice, concise discussion of it. He has written more than 10 books. I've only read one of his books, and it was quite interesting and helpful. There are lots and lots of philosophers who would be classified as Stoic. I have chosen my favorite 4 to share with you today, and I give them to you in chronological order. The first one is Zeno. I know the least about him, but a couple of his quotes were so on point that I was quite charmed by his work. The first one is that we have one mouth and 2 ears, therefore we should listen a lot more than we talk. Well, that's true in life, and it's also true in language learning. If you want to acquire a language, you need to listen a lot more than you need to speak. The other great quote from Zeno that I'd like to share is that we should not spoil what we have by desiring what we do not. I think this is very much the case in the 21st century in the United States, is people always want more, and it causes a lot of stress. The second Stoic philosopher I would mention and share is Seneca. Now, his work is available to us, published as a book, Letters from a Stoic. This is a collection of letters that he wrote to his friend Lucilius, and he put his thoughts down in writing, and we can now enjoy those. I have that book, and I'm currently reading it, although I've not read much thus far. The quote I would share from Seneca today is that we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. Often when we feel something bad is going to happen or might happen, we worry about it. And what he is telling us, of course, is we shouldn't do that. The next Stoic philosopher I would showcase here is Epictetus. He was born into slavery and was a slave until he was 30 years old. He overcame that after he was freed and became a well-known philosopher and a very influential person in Rome. A work attributed to him that is readily available is his Enchiridion. It's basically a handbook on Stoic philosophy according to Epictetus. There are a number of great quotes from Epictetus, and I'd like to share 3. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Our chief task is to identify those things over which we have control and those things over which we do not have control. We should focus our attention on things that we can control. And along the same lines, we cannot control our external circumstances, but we can control how we respond to them. The fourth author I'd like to discuss is Marcus Aurelius. You may know he was an emperor of Rome, but he was an emperor during very difficult times. They had wars. They had a huge plague. There was a lot of intrigue. It was very difficult. He did not have an easy time of it. And in addition to being emperor of Rome, he was quite the philosopher. Now, he was influenced by the previous Stoic philosophers. We have a wonderful collection of writing from Marcus Aurelius published as his Meditations. Now, you remember early in this episode, I complained about how obtuse the translations were for the ancient philosophers that I was trying to become familiar with as a student. Well, this was very much the case with old translations of Meditations. They were difficult. But luckily, we now have a new translation into English by Gregory Hayes. And this is a wonderful, approachable, understandable treatment of the Meditations. So I highly recommend that if you're interested. Marcus Aurelius was very prolific when it came to quotes. He wrote down a lot of his thoughts. From his writings, you can see that he is a very practical, get it done now kind of a guy. He was not given to procrastination. In a previous video, I quoted him as saying that we should own the morning. He advocated getting out of bed and getting on with the day to be productive human beings. He said we cannot put off until tomorrow what we should do today. I have read the Gregory Hayes version of his Meditations, and I can tell you it is excellent. He provided a lot of thoughts which basically are bullet points for how to be productive human beings. Do it now. Do it while you have the time. Do it while there's still a chance of success. Do not delay. Do not wish. And do not wait. You can see how these bite-sized bullet point recommendations would be very popular among people striving to be efficient and productive in the 21st century. I have found the Stoic philosophers' works to be very useful to me for several reasons. The first one is their recommendations are not really in conflict with any beliefs that we may already have and cherish. They give specific advice on how to deal with adversity, how to deal with difficult people, how to deal with anxiety and stress. And most of all, they help us focus our attention on how to be more productive. And this is very useful for the language learner. Our language learning efforts are in competition for time with the rest of our life. And the recommendations of the Stoic philosophers have helped me to focus my priorities and get things done. Now, this is not an in-depth treatment of the Stoic school of philosophy. I am not a guru. I'm not a super expert. I'm just very interested in this topic, and I've done a bunch of reading. You may have Stoic philosophers or other philosophers that you prefer. I invite comments below if you have another philosopher who adds to our journey as language learners. And if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.